makes great leaders. It's from the inside out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a lot of people know what they're doing. Some people know how they're doing it, but not many people know why they're doing it.
Yes.
And the great leaders and organizations have a very firm idea on why they're doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And the how and the what is just a consequence of that.
Death and birth hold the ends of the luminous pause that's called our life's journey. And while we're doing this, we have from the time that we were born, we have standing on our left a great companion called death. And death asks us a question every single day. Are you using the great gift of life well? And another companion on our right, whether we're male or female, is asking us another question at every age. Are you doing what you've come here to do? And that companion is called destiny.
Well, one of the great hardships I've had to endure in my work as a social worker, traveling back and forth from the Wild Coast to Johannesburg, is to have to stay at places like this. I'm at the lodge of my good friends Simon and Cheryl Blackburn. Stay overnight here on my way back and forth. They have this marvelous lodge at the foot of the Ukuhlamba mountains, which are in the background. It's Spionkop, which is the site of one of the most bloody and famous battles of the Anglo-Boer War, so-called, the South African War. And Simon and Cheryl have just helped me shave off some of their profits of their luxury lodge in the cause of helping me to make my burden a little bit more bearable. So I want to just pay tribute to Simon and Cheryl and the staff of the lodge, who have all become friends, and I boastfully bring friends here, and they just can't believe how lucky I have been. Simon is in fact the son of Molly Blackburn, an extraordinary woman who tragically lost her life in a motor accident, but she had been extremely active in the 80s as a member of the Black Sash in challenging the apartheid injustices and exposing wrongdoing. So it's actually been very helpful to me to be reminded that, you know, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. What I'm experiencing today in the terms of whatever retaliation and hardship at myself and the people I work with, whistleblowers and activists, and, you know, that it's really nothing new. So her life was in fact curtailed, tragically. Who knows what else she would have done. So thank you, Simon, Cheryl, your wonderful family and friend and colleagues and staff. I hope you will stay in business much longer for all the millions of people that are going to now flock here, because your place really deserves to be right up there. It's been one of the premier destinations for anybody who wants to understand a little bit about what's happened in South Africa, whilst having a really wonderful service from your staff. Well, I'm sitting here outside the Molly Blackburn Library. I'm just waiting for Simon and another good friend of mine, Stefan Hofstadter, to come for a conversation with me about how this special place lends itself to helping us live our life forward by better understanding our life backwards. And by that I mean not just the story of our individual life, but our shared story in terms of the particular group that we have some shared identity with. And then what that story has to say about our story as a human species on the planet. And I have in mind Richard Rohr's concept of the cosmic egg, which I'm finding very useful in counseling the whistleblowers that come to see me are in conflict. And one way of understanding the conflict is that it's a conflict between the story that the organization wants to have them tell and participate in, because it's in conflict with their own personal story, their own principles, values, and ethics that they were brought up with from their grandparents and their parents. And if we go in the other direction, there's also a conflict between the organization's story and the larger story that we should be telling ourselves as a nation if we took our Constitution and the Bill of Rights seriously. Well, to illustrate, for example, if we look at the South African Airways story, when Dudu Myeni was made the chair of the board and proceeded to turn it into her own personal fiefdom. Well, unfortunately for her, but fortunately for South Africa, Cynthia Stimple was the group treasurer and would have no part in playing ball with that false narrative and blew the whistle. Experienced huge retaliation, but we now know who are the victors in that situation, because she knew that Dudu Myeni was imposing her own vainglorious story of power and prestige to effectively turn South African Airways into her own possession, or the possession of herself, President Jacob Zuma, and the Gupta brothers. So when Simon and Stefan arrive, we will unpack something of what the Blackburn family story has to say about our story as a nation, and even more generally as a species, human species on planet Earth. Simon ducked off. He's camera shy, but he's given us a greater opportunity to hear from his wife, Cheryl. Every time I visit this place, there's some improvement from the previous time. And I've been coming for 13 years. If ever there was close to perfection, it is. I mean, like this latest occasion, I come down and there are these little booty things that you can put on. And so I didn't even need to bring my own slippers. You don't need your own dressing gown. It's got it all there.
Hand-knitted cotton slippers done by some ladies in Harrismith. There's a group of farm labourers' wives that were empowered to start hand-knitting these cotton slippers, and they are just the best. I hate disposable stuff, so if there's anything that we can do that we're not chucking stuff away, like the disposable slippers, I thought that this is a better way to go. And the Europeans absolutely love them. Europeans have got great respect for your house and walking inside your house with muddy boots, because they clean their own houses. And so most of them use day slippers, and we sell them like hotcakes in the shop. So they're in the guest room to use as slippers because the floors are cold.
But I want to ask Stefan, what I had told you about this place, how did it sort of correspond to what you experienced when you arrived here?
You'd mentioned the library.
That was your attraction.
It was my immediate attraction. And also, Molly Blackburn, you mentioned all her, photographs being brought from UCT. And had this amazing Boer War collection of books. Yeah, I really found the Boer War corner, and I thought, I wonder if the book that I worked on, my first foray into narrative military history writing, is here. And mentioned to John that I don't even have a copy myself, because it was printed a long time ago. We didn't get many copies, and lo and behold, I found it on the shelf. And that was just great to see.
The great escape of the Boer Pimpernel, just here on the bed. And I think that's why Simon escaped. He probably took a leaf out of this book so he wouldn't have to face my camera.
Yeah, so I loved seeing that, because I've just finished working on the Battle of Bongi, the book that I wrote with Warren Thompson and James Otwell.
That's right.
And Great Escape was my first attempt at writing military history in a way that a broader audience can enjoy it, as a ripping yarn, as a story that will grip the reader. I like the scholarly detail that went into this. So it was based on a master's thesis written by Franz Johann Pretorius, and he is really a very highly respected Boer War historian. And the level of detail that he goes into, both for this thesis but many of his other works, he really is a great scholar of the Boer War. So I sort of wanted to do something looking up to somebody like the great World War writer like Thomas Pakenham. You know, let's see if we can turn it into something that reads more like that. That was what I tried to do. So then, you know, now recently having worked on the Battle of Bangui, I was thinking back a lot to this book because again, it's about 3 days of you know, South African paratroopers and special forces operators in the Central African Republic having this completely uneven odds, fighting this war that they should never have fought in. And there's also just incredible detail. I mean, we spent, I think I mentioned this morning to you, 7 years. James and I initially started in 2013, and then we, you know, tens and thousands of words of this exclusive material. And then when Warren, you know, got the contract to do the book, and he wrote us in, we went back to the Central African Republic and we got a whole bunch of documents. I really wanted to make it something that, again, was accessible, you know, to the general reader.
Well, let's see if they are, because what I just find it fascinating, this kind of synchronicity that he comes like unexpectedly finds this book in his shelf. And then last night we were talking and over dinner, and Simon suddenly realizes, hey, but I've got this book next to my bed. It's also one of yours. And I was just kind of bringing Stefan here and saying, I hope my good friends Simon and Cheryl will forgive me for bringing this guy with me. They find like he's one of the celebrities. He gives this whole place a sort of sense of meaning. A book needs to have an opening paragraph that grabs you. Now, I'm going to read the opening paragraph of both books.
Jeez, that's
Chapter 1,
pressure.
3 Cheers for Oom Christian, 7th of June, 1900. On a featureless plain sweeping down to the Renoster River in the Orange Free State, the muffled sound of hooves pounding the vast, dusty veldt echoed into the distance. A Boer commander was closing in on its prey. Just before dawn, the leading horseman stopped to scan the horizon, but it was pitch black out there. No matter, he knew this part of the country like the back of his hand. His own farmstead stood but a few kilometers off. So that immediately, excellent way of sending you. Now, I would guess that Franz Johann Pretorius's thesis did not start like that.
No.
Chapter 1 of the Battle of Bangui. Rifleman Given Mulatsi stirs a lump of bully beef, warming in his Dixie over an open fire. Cooking smells waft around the camp as long shadows spread across the parade ground, where he and other paratroopers have pitched their tents. Mulaudzi is in a good mood, well, feeling as agreeable as one can be expected under the circumstances. Today is Friday the 22nd of March 2013. They've been in the stinking hole for almost 3 months now on a mission that was meant to last 3 weeks. Bush kit and bush rations for the rank and file. Never mind, soon his belly will be filled with warm food. He'll drift off to sleep in no time and dream of home, of Lebohang, his beautiful headstrong wife, and little Vuvafwo, so small but already old enough for nursery school. Where do you see your literary career taking you?
Well, first we want to turn that into a Hollywood blockbuster.
But what about the Christian de Wet? There's a film on that one too. Has it been made? Do you know?
I don't know if it has.
Yeah.
Listen, there are not many films made on the Boer War. Well, none that I can find. And why not?
Yeah.
Because there's so many like European World War films. So many. I've watched one, Breaker Morant. There is a movie that was made about him. But otherwise, there's really nothing on the Boer War. No feature. And I mean, yeah, as you say, there's incredible stories. But why? There have been a couple of crews that have come snooping around. And, I mean, I want to say 10 years ago, they said, no, they're doing a movie on Spionkop and the Boer War. Haven't seen it. Then 5 years ago, there's another crew sniffing around and people said, oh, they're doing this movie. But it's never, we've never heard anything, seen anything.
Well, you know, it really astounds me because from a filmmaking point of view, actually, there's a very gripping drama of history, these incredible landscapes, the environment, you know, there's good weather, there's,
all of it.
you know, there's a cultural history at play here. Say something about the actual environment here and this nature reserve, and has that been also a selling point for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. So to attract our European visitors, if you, for example, if we go to Germany or France or Belgium to do marketing trips, we take out all our battlefield pictures. We don't mention at all that we're at a battle site. If you say it once, they won't send people. It's like they've got a preconceived idea. So then we just push all the nature. We're next to a nature reserve. We can do game walks in there. We've got, 30 kilometers of trails that they can walk on their own in amongst the cattle and sometimes game. I mean, you saw yesterday when we were having sundowners with the cattle, there were some warthogs. We could hear the jackal calling. So it's a beautiful natural...
And the mountain in the background if you want to go ballooning or something like that.
Yeah, the Drakensberg's only 45 minutes drive away.
The canopy.
Hiking, ziplining, all that sort of stuff up there as well. Yeah.
There's a deeper story to be understood that you don't have from the media in Europe.
Yes, and I think that's quite often what happens with the Europeans. So they come without the interest at all in the history. And like by the second day, then they start asking questions, because then they do start, it's not shoved down their throat. They, sort of read the books here, look at the pictures on the wall, and then they start probing a little bit about the history. And I mean, I'm not saying we don't have Europeans that go on tour. We do have Dutch, Belgians, we've had Americans, that will go on the battlefield tours. It still does predominantly seem to be the British interest. But the Europeans, once they're here, then they do seem to want to dig a little bit deeper.
Well, one of the things I love about this place is that you integrate it within. It's not like a little island in the middle of it. You integrate it within the community. Your children go to the local school.
Yeah.
They're one of only 3 white kids in the school, and, black kids. And that you're part of it. They learn the language. Your staff and everyone that works here feel that they have a stake in it.
Yeah, so I think for us it was just a natural thing to be part of the community. Our neighbours is the Hambrook village, and all of our staff come from there, and so for us the more we could be integrated with them and get ideas from them with how we can help them in their daily life, or what needs there are in that community, then the more we can help them. And
well, it's so nice to see a place going from strength to strength. COVID, I mean, I was so concerned for you over COVID. Did you get help from the state?
Devastated. We did. We applied, every single funding that was available we applied for, and we got, I mean, they don't all give you money, you've got to pay them back. It helped our staff tremendously, because most of those funding things were to help the staff. So, but we've still got a lot of debt. So we've got a very kind guest, actually, who's a friend that gave us the money to build the library, and we were hoping to pay that back. We would have paid it back by August 2020, but we sort of reloaned all the money, so we still owe him basically for the library. So I mean, we've got another 3 years, I think, of paying back the debt before we can recover. But at least we're here, and we've managed to retain all of our staff. So.
And now you've got a new road being built. This is the thing which I was so impressed about. You think it's a setback, but it's going from strength to strength.
Jeez, and it's a fancy road.
A nice road. So it's not going to be washed away, and it's going to...
Yeah, and so we helped with the letter of motivation. The ANC councillor at the time was pushing the traffic department for this road, because it was a disaster, and that was even before the April floods. When we had heavy summer rains, the poor community, to try and get to the tarmac road to get to Ladysmith or Bergville to work, they had to walk through deep mud like this. So you see everyone taking off their shoes, walking through the mud. Then some days the taxi couldn't actually get there. I mean, it really was a disaster. And then obviously the April floods, they just started pulling up the road to build the tarmac. I mean, there were 2 days that we couldn't get to school. Everyone in Hambrook just sat.
Well, it sounds like the rooster has told us our time is up.
Yes, perfect. Exactly on 15 minutes. Thanks, Fred.
I want to thank you, Cheryl and Simon and your family. It's like to just feel how you never spare anything to being helping me. It's really made my work for the last 15 years going back and forth, and that's a pleasure.
Oh, pleasure.
So, that's 3 Tree Hill Lodge.
Okay.
that ever befell our country. How do you interpret it yourself personally?
I think it's going to be a tremendous loss to the country. It's going to be obviously the most enormous loss to myself. And I just hope that somebody will emerge who can take over from where Molly left off. And that in time that there will be sense and understanding in this country and eventually lead to peace.
I thought if I had like another life and I would have the time to be able to write it, that actually the story could be a love story. Because I just feel that, yeah, shame, Simon's father, he really struggled. You know, it couldn't have been an easy life being married to her, but even before being married to her, how's this? He was at her wedding. He was a best man. So her second husband, Simon's father, Gavin.
Right.
He was actually at the wedding table at the first marriage. So they were already friends back then. And I think they were secretly in love even back then. She got married to this Englishman who then took her to Belgium. She was very miserable there and didn't want to be a housewife and living in Europe. Had 3 kids and then came back to South Africa and then married Gavin.
I see.
And then had another 4 kids.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So that's
So that's why I thought it could actually be an incredible love story. And then too, I mean, their life in that house in 13 Brighton Drive, the people that were head in that house that were, you know, it was like a bus station of people being,
So
you know,
a safe house for...
exactly. And the people that came to dinner. And then, like, there's a Vanessa Brereton or something. The spy, yeah, she's there having dinner. She wangled her way in, came for dinner at their house. So there she is sitting with them having a fun dinner party. But actually, she's blimmin' sticking them in the back. Yeah. You know, they get letter bombs, they get rocks thrown through their windows, you know, all that sort of stuff. And he's trying to run a medical practice and look after all these kids because his wife is always out, you know, in the townships and helping other people. I think it was very hard for him. He must have known that at some point they were going to knock her off. I mean, you know, with all of those threats. And I just feel that he had such a lonely last 20 years of his life, really, without her. You know, and it just devastated him, having all that.
Yeah, but it seems like Simon's family, you know, quite a close-knit bunch. And his half-siblings from the first marriage? Or?
Yes, no, get on super well. So the eldest, the brother, was killed. Sorry, 6 months before. I think he died before.
Well, there was another very interesting thing about that.
Yeah.
Because as you were telling me about his brother, just say a bit more about that, what you know about his brother.
I found, so when I was busy researching all of this stuff, on the internet I did find, I could only find like one thing about him, which was an interview from another journalist that had worked with him in Sudan or something. You know, a little bit that he wrote about his character. And I've actually got that. I'll send it to you. I saved it. He was writing some story on the corruption in Sudan. Was also targeted and then shot down and killed. Yeah.
You know, because I've got one of our whistleblowers who's come in, he's now blowing the whistle on corruption in Sudan in 2022.
Yeah.
The point is that their memory lives on, and this is the consolation we're able to give my friend, is that make sure you're living life, and all the other whistleblowers I work with just have a sort of attitude, you know, they just get on with it. You know, one of them was just saying in a WhatsApp this morning, I decided, you know, I was under threat and I needed to get a bodyguard and all the rest. He says, I eventually decided after 3 days, get rid of the bodyguard go and double my life insurance so that my kids had some good thing and carry on living and not allowing it to sort of determine my life. That's 3 years ago. She's still going strong there. They're still harassing her. They're still not making her life pleasant. But she said she's not prepared to allow her life to be put on hold just because some people for whom power, privilege is more important than people.
Oh, I don't know. So after reading all of that stuff, my own deduction of what happened was a spy, Vanessa Brereton, possibly, sitting at the dinner table, knew that they were going up to Uitenhage to visit this family who needed the lawyer. And this is on the 28th of December. So, I mean, it's in, you know, it's everyone should be on holiday at the beach. But here she is and her sister having to leave at 5 a.m, drive up to Uitenhage, you know, try and help these people. You know, she knew about it.
She was going there.
And then there's mysteriously a roadblock at this one point where I think this young chap was accosted by the police and either, drugged or something.
You mean the driver of the other vehicle?
The driver of the other vehicle. Because then when they were leaving on the way back on a dead straight road, you can see, and it's now nighttime, and you can see from a long way off if there's a car. You know what I'm saying? You would have seen.
Right.
But yet the lights flicked on at the last minute.
And there was just suddenly headlights in front of us on our side of the road. And that's all I remember. I know that the headlights were very close. I know that it was very sudden. I knew that there was no ways we could avoid hitting whatever this was. And
And they drove into this car where the person in the other car was already dead. I think he was killed before.
How was it known that the person in the other car was already dead?
No, but that's what I'm saying. We don't. It was covered up.
Right.
It wasn't ever made.
Disclosed.
He was a teetotaler. He was a young coloured guy from the community that I think was pulled off at this stop to make it look like he was drunk and he drove into them.
Yes.
But he wasn't. I think he was dead already. They'd poured alcohol all over him and this car. It was very easy to kill black people in those days. Very easy. I mean, every 5 minutes someone disappeared, no one asked questions.
Yeah.
But in fact, Neil Agate was like the first
white
white
guy.
guy. And then to me, she was as well. And you had to cover it up really well because people would ask a lot of questions. If this, and it was never a murder, it was a car accident.
Right.
Because that's how they wanted it to look. And they were very clever in the way they made it look. That's my...
Your plausible theory.
Whether it's...
Well, it meant somebody would need to come and make a disclosure.
Yeah.
And for amnesty, you know, but nobody... You know.
Well, I mean, Brereton could have.
Yeah.
Brereton's handler could have.
Yeah.
It's probably, if she was involved, he would have possibly planned the whole thing. They could have made.
People are getting older in life and suddenly they think, what sort of legacy are they going to lead? Who knows what might come out? I mean, there's also questions I've been revisiting, the death of Albert Lutuli. People still do not believe that was an accident.
Suspicious.
And why did it happen? What were the agendas there? Most recently, we had the story about Gavin Watson.
Gavin Watson, yes.
You know, this
Case
car
in point,
crash.
Absolutely.
A collection of clippings.
It's awesome, hey?
Wow. I didn't see this before.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, 1985, I just left school, I think. I honestly didn't realize this was going on. And I didn't, even until, only when I put all of this together and started reading all these newspaper clippings.
Right.
I was like, damn, you know.
Ben Ockrey has this lovely quote. He says, "Stories are the secret reservoir of values, change the stories individuals and nations live by and tell themselves, and you change the individuals and nations. If they tell themselves stories that are lies, they will suffer the future consequences of those lies. If they tell themselves stories that face their own truth, they will free their history for future flowerings."
Yeah, wow.
You know, you might think you're killing the truth, but the truth somehow has its own way of kind of manifesting itself. And I share that with whistleblower clients. The truth is an emancipatory force. It will set you free. Even though at first it might sort of piss you off or disconcert you.
Truth will set you free. That's the bottom line.
yeah.
I mean, that for me is, you know, in this country with all these TRC cases, that we've only had 2 members of the apartheid security forces since '94 who've actually spent time in jail. You know, there have been other convictions.
Eugene de Kock.
Suspended sentences, but it's Eugene de Kock and Freddie Barnett. And I mean, that just, you know, we can't fix the criminal justice system now if there are literally thousands and thousands of murders that people have, nobody has had any jail time.
No, listen, reading this and then I did lots of stuff on the internet watching, and there's some cool Reuters clips, interviews with her on the internet, video footage of her.
Right.
But I subsequently followed up on some of the, because there were some policemen that hated her and maybe also had something to do with her death.
Yeah.
But I subsequently read up about they are rotting inside. So you say the truth will set you free. Those poor guys, I'm telling you, have the most miserable existence. Those that are still alive, or that maybe died, because some of them died in this last sort of 5 years.
Yeah, yeah.
They had the most miserable 20 years of existence after 1994.
Yeah, the perpetrators.
It killed them. They killed them. What I'm saying is they had such terrible guilt, and they lived a life of after that. So their own actions poisoned
their mental
them for the
health
rest of their life.
basically
They
takes
should
a
have-
dive.
Exactly. They should have. It would have been easier if they actually had been put away. So what I'm saying is, like, I think the torture of them not going to jail, it's a punishment for them. Because I'm telling you, there's no ways that they didn't have a terrible last 20 years of their lives. And there's some particular individuals. There's one constable there that was horrific to her. And you read about his life and what a tragic ending, and just lonely, and alcohol, and just couldn't, because all those things haunt him until he dies.
Well, it says Desmond Tutu in my book, he's got that inscription where he said, from the TRC, unless we exorcise the ghosts of the past, they will return to haunt us in the future. Interesting about Molly, I noticed in these clippings, she also got a defamation suit against her.
Yeah. About the drunk policeman,
Yes.
She didn't call them drunk. So it was a Friday. She said they are drunk. That's right. I think she said that they were drunks or something like that. And she said, no, you are drunk. They've had too much to drink, and they reeked of alcohol, and I've got photographs, which I didn't put in here, of the guys, the policemen holding beers.
So they thought to try and retaliate against her for that.
And get her into jail, yeah.
I took comfort from that because I've got a defamation suit against me too, and just see that it's nothing new. They still try those tactics to actually get you on the defensive.
So what's interesting when you look at some of those Reuters clips, and I think that is what made her so popular amongst particularly black women in South Africa, was that she was incredibly compassionate. She's really just an estate agent, mother, middle-class white woman with 7 kids. 7 kids. And that's what made her approachable. That's what made these women be able to go to her. They'd go to the police and say, my child hasn't come home from school, i.e. was abducted, can you help? Of course not. They're not going to help you because they're the ones that took the child. Who do you go to next? Gee, here's this woman. She's a mother, she's, and that's why. And she really took every case to heart. And I mean, in some of those interviews on the Reuters thing, she's in tears. She cries at the mother's, cries with the mother. All those people at the funerals. And your funeral, and other...
So on that array of photographs, I was most encouraged to see my lawyer appearing with Molly Blackburn at a public meeting at UCT and some Jeff Budlander. I mean, that was in the 80s. Yeah. We're now in 2020s, and Jeff Budlander is now somebody who your go-to person if you for human rights issues and justice. And just to think that they were all part of that ferment.
So none of these photos came from UCT. Those were all burnt.
That's right. That's why.
In the roads, when they did all those
Fees Must Fall thing.
Fees Must Fall. They burnt all of her photographs. And some of them we didn't have copies for. So all of this stuff I got off Yeah, from newspaper things that I scanned and old
So did you
stuff from the family.
collect all these?
So you know what? I asked all the siblings to
Right.
send me whatever they had, and they had
yeah.
files and stuff, and one sent
So
me
you
a box
become
and
like the
another box.
archivist.
Yeah, and then it was just lucky. We got COVID in March 2020, and we had to be away from the guest here. We had a full lodge, so we isolated ourselves for 10 days at home. I can't sit still for 10 days, and I couldn't come to the lodge here. And so I thought, okay, well, geez, I've asked for all of these books and things. Let me start going through all the newspaper clippings. And then as I was going through them, I thought, well, let me just do a thing like this. And yeah, so that was only because I had that time.
Right.
Whatever adversity you're in, if you have a curiosity about what's happening,
Yeah.
and you start saying, well, what can I now do with what I've got? Something emerges, and that's what gets people through, and that's the
Yeah.
people that are resilient.
Yeah.
Because resilience is what really is required.
I do think this would make a great film, the way you've described
No,
it.
me too.
But-
The family was asked by a very famous movie producer in America if they could do a movie about Molly Blackburn's life.
Really?
Yeah. I'm sure I put the newspaper. Jane Fonda and Marlon Brando were going to do. Promise you.
And who was going to be
While
P.W.
Sidney
Botha?
Poitier will take the role of Nelson Mandela. In a television miniseries scheduled to broadcast at the end of next year, Marlon Brando is getting a part, possibly as P.W. Botha.
Oh, that would have been priceless.
Promise.
Jane Fonda as Molly Blackburn. Well, that would have been priceless.
Would have, eh?
Right, well, let's do it together.
Well, how about we ask George Clooney?
Yes, why not?
That's an
Yes,
excellent
because
idea.
he's part of whistleblowing. She was a whistleblower.
Exactly,
In
Because
and
he makes
the
films.
1980s, yeah.
yeah, well,
He could
Now
be
that
Gavin
you're
Blackburn.
friends with the
Yeah.
George Clooney crew, I think it's time to...
well,
Reach
yeah,
out.
with because his NGO that he set up called the Sentry
Yes.
is is what's doing this investigation
Come on, John, that's
on
perfect.
behalf of this guy
In fact,
from
he
South
looks like-
Sudan.
he looks like Gavin in his early days. A bit of George Clooney in there.
No, but I've got him booked to actually play me when they do a sort of
But look, if you don't write the whole package of that,
Yeah.
and then get John to get his friend
To get his
George
George.
to Clooney to
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, because when I told my daughter that, she said, make a film about the Wild Coast. I said, I think George Clooney would be the right person to play me, hey? She said, no, Dad, Jack Nicholson.
Well, what an amazing experience this film project has been for me. And while putting it together, with the additional bits and pieces that Cheryl had contributed, it occurred to me that this film has turned out to be a lot more than a promo exercise to sell 3 Tree Hill Lodge. I hope it serves as proof that I am at last learning what the fourfold way means in practice. Something discovered and discerned by a cultural anthropologist, Angelos Arian, who was looking for universal truths and principles that apply across all cultures. And I first came across her work at least 20 years ago, and I found it very good as a group work methodology to facilitate healing, resolving conflict, and enhancing consciousness and growth.
And so I leave you with the 4 principles that if we show up and we pay attention to what has heart and meaning, and we tell the truth without blame or judgment, or with compassion by saying what we mean, doing what we say, and saying what's so, that we're able then to follow the last way, the wisdom way, which is to plan well and prepare well, but to be open to outcome and not attached to outcome. I wanted just to say that the one way that we can keep our hearts open is through one practice that's shared globally, which is the heart is always open if we can give gratitude. It's impossible to give gratitude from a closed heart. And so just the practice of gratitude every day. And so I want to...
Well, that link to the TED Talk she gave appears above, and I would encourage you to watch that. Now, I had scripted things on the assumption that Simon would show up, but Cheryl came instead. But listening to her tell Molly's story with such heart and meaning made it extra special and poignant. She never, in fact, even knew her mother-in-law personally. She and Simon only hooked up many years after Molly was killed. But love has an eternal and boundless quality and beyond the boundaries of life and death. And Cheryl showed so much love for Molly and Gavin. And she showed that sense of accountability to the generations that go before so that she can pass him on to her own children. And the love that she and Simon and their family enjoy, including, in fact, with Cheryl's mother, Fiona, who is also part of the Three Tree Hill family ecosystem, which nourishes an endless cycle of guests, and even those like me who keep coming back to unburden ourselves. The participation interaction had real heart and meaning. And then the speaking of truth was exploratory, stating assumptions, but in a way that was open to being revised and changed. I heard on the radio the other day someone saying, wisdom is not about learning something new every day. It's about unlearning something you thought was true every day and revising your assumptions. But in that fourth stage of being open to outcome, not attached to it, that's not something which comes naturally. And I've learned it more in the breach rather than the observance in my career. To detach oneself from that often ego-driven outcome and allow things to flow, well, that's at last seemed to happen so well in this engagement. Well, you must begin with the end in mind, but as Simon observed in the clip that I used at the start, which by the way I filmed 9 years ago, the end is a matter of why are you doing what you're doing rather than what and how you are doing it. And that fourth way will only happen if we follow the previous three. Well, in so doing, it was such an unburdening experience for me because, well, I was really burdened by the story of that new whistleblower client that I mentioned from South Sudan. It's a country which has been rated as the most corrupt country in the world. And before arriving at Three Tree Lodge, I had spent several hours over the previous few days on Zoom meetings with him and others supporting him to assess the risks to him and how to mitigate them. All I can say at this stage that his life is in danger for having blown the whistle on corruption. So hearing Molly's story and blending it with what was happening now, today in real life, was very helpful. Well, his story will break in the next 2 weeks or so, and he is working with PLAF, which is the Platform to Protect Whistleblowers in Africa, who have supported other whistleblowers, and a corruption-busting organization called The Sentry, to reveal damning disclosures which will probably have far-reaching consequences.
To help end Africa's deadliest wars, we used satellites to track atrocities. We went into war zones. We got arrested to highlight the issues. Now we're going after the corrupt transnational networks funding and profiting from war.
Real leverage for peace and human rights will come when the people who benefit from war will pay a price for the damage they cause.
It was co-founded by George Clooney, which explains why Stefan referred to him as my friend. Well, I haven't actually met him and he doesn't know who I am, but hopefully he will get to see this video and be persuaded to come with his wife and family to spend his next holiday here at Three Tree Hill Lodge. And in between enjoying all that is on offer here, we can maybe talk about turning the love story of Molly and Gavin Blackburn into a Hollywood blockbuster. Now, I don't know whether or not Molly's death was a deliberate action by the apartheid security forces to take her out, but either way, it was a tragedy. And remember, besides Molly, the driver of the other car and Brian Bishop were also killed. And social work is helping people to process tragedy into learning, healing, and hope. And that is really what is emerging still from their story. And until the big one comes, I can't wait to get this little film uploaded so we can inspire new whistleblower clients and activists that I work with, and anyone who cares, to take Gavin Blackburn's work words to heart, to carry on the work that Molly started. Well, 5 years after her death, sadly she wasn't able to see it, we did see peace starting to break out. And we now owe it to Gavin and Molly not to stop seeking and working for the things that make for peace. And getting back to that concept of the cosmic egg, Molly didn't cling to her story in a self-important way. Life for her wasn't just about her private, small self, lived in quest of power, prestige, and possessions. She stands as an example of someone who did not have what Nietzsche termed the incarnate will to power, but in sharp contrast, Molly expressed, we could call, an incarnate will to truth. And she spoke that truth to power. And in so doing, she stands as a role model to empower us to do the same today. Anyone who bears the burden of witnessing will yield their individualistic story to a shared story. And then, as solidarity is formed, that becomes our story. And that then works to unmask the false narratives that the rich, the powerful, and the corrupt tell themselves. Our story must then yield itself to the story that the nation tells itself, one that faces our own truths so that our history can be freed for future flowerings, as Ben Okri expressed so beautifully. I just love the way that Okri's quote gels so well with something which Richard Rohr says. We need to tell a story that manifests the great patterns that are always true and save us from the illusions of we and the smallness of me. So one way of expressing that interaction that needs to happen between my story and our story and the story is to see this as being a simultaneous process of a journey inward of conscience and a journey outward of consciousness. And with that blending, I think that's what Molly Blackburn's life tells us. If we integrate the inward and outward journeys, we actually become part of a force of nature. Well, that's it. Thank you for watching. The next film upload will be an interview with my new whistleblower friend, just as soon as the story breaks in the international media. So please subscribe to my channel so you can get notice about that. It's a wrap.